Okay, other encouraging news. I wanted to read Brian's latest update.
Yes.
The latest post is August 15th, so that tells you timing-wise, because this probably won't come out for a couple of weeks, so you might know more than we do at that point. But in our timeline, Brian is officially out of the ICU and in a step-down room, a room that is between an ICU bed and a regular patient bed. A repeat CT scan this afternoon showed continued improvement in healing. His neuro team is very pleased. Now we're waiting on bed availability in an inpatient rehab facility. Progress is slow, but moving in the right direction. He's working on conversation and motor skills. Memories and thoughts are there, but articulating them is a big challenge. It's hard work, but we all know he is ready for it. So, latest update on Brian. Brian, we're wishing you the best. It's really encouraging that the thoughts are still there, that the mind is still there. I think that's the fear that I had more than anything else, is that we weren't sure that Brian was still going to be... I wasn't sure that Brian was still going to be there. And so it's super encouraging to know that he is there. And if he has some trouble articulating things, then, rehab and friends will get him there.
Keep the yellow Aja waves coming, people. It's working. It's working. He's doing better. Mm-hmm. And just keep the good energy coming and keep checking out the blog. They're doing less daily updates now that things are less dire, but it's still absolutely worth keeping up with and keeping him in your thoughts, because he's got a long road ahead despite the sunny prognosis at this point.
And posting him positive messages on that blog. Keep commenting on
that, or in the Tarval and After Dark server. Yep. Whole channel dedicated to it. You guys heard about it in the last episode that is going to come out in 2 days from the future of when we're recording this. Is a lag, but you know where to go at this point. So just keep the good vibes coming.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Chapter 9, A Cup of Tea, and our symbol is the Forsaken Clover Snake.
Because this cup of tea is a Dark Friend plot.
Mm-hmm. I guess I should call it a Dark Friend one, but I always thought it was more Forsaken than Dark Friend. I usually associate it with Forsaken in particular. So I do find it odd to be on this chapter where I don't actually see any Forsaken.
I would agree with that. I don't see the Forsaken in this either. Cheyenne has pretty much been given like a grand directive and let loose to do her own thing.
I mean, so I guess you could claim that this is, Shawmail's plot, right?
But not really, because he just told Cheyenne to fuck with shit. Or maybe to, screw around with Elayne, but I don't think that she was told directly by Sawmail, I need you to do this one thing to be part of how I'm taking it. I don't think he cares about Elayne.
At this point, it's Moradin, or is it...
Who is Cheyenne reporting to?
Yeah.
Is she reporting to anyone?
Because she killed Jacob Carradine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She said Moradin wants her punished about the Aes Sedai, whose name I'm spacing right now. So it is Moradin. And I do not think Moradin is really plotting at a fine detail about the Andorran succession. I think he's just let the Lord of Chaos rule directiving.
Fair enough.
But I don't know what Cheyenne's goal is. She points Mellar at Elayne, and so clearly he has a goal to, get into her good graces and then kidnap her and all of that, but I don't quite know why Cheyenne pointed him in that direction.
I mean, disrupt the biggest country in the world with the last battle coming, so they don't have a queen, and they go to... they want to Kyrian their asses, right? They want to take someone down from the top and have the entire country fall apart between... you've got Elania and all of these various factions out in the middle of the forest who are going to fight this out, and they can go kill each other all they want all day, as long as Elaine's not in the picture.
Yeah. So again, I agree with you that this doesn't feel like a good time for the Forsaken symbol, because there's no Forsaken fingerprints on this.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's called the Cup of Tea because, she gets drugged with fork root. Spoilers.
Once in her dressing room, Elayne hurriedly changed out of her riding clothes with the help of Asanda, the white-haired pensioner she had chosen for her maid. The slender, dignified woman was a trifle slow-moving, but she knew her job and did not waste time chattering. In fact, she seldom said a word beyond suggestions on clothing, and the comment given every day that Elayne looked like her mother. Flames danced atop thick logs on a white marble hearth at one end of the room, but the fire did little to take the chill off the air. Quickly she put on a fine blue wool with patterns of seed pearls on the high neck and down the sleeves, her silver-worked belt with a small silver-sheathed dagger, and the silver-embroidered blue velvet slippers. There might be no time to change again before seeing the merchants, and they must be impressed at the sight of her. She would have to be sure Brigida was there. Brigida was most impressive in her uniform, and Brigida would take even listening to merchants as a break. By the heated knot of irritation resting in the back of Elayne's head, the Captain General of the Queen's Guard was finding those reports heavy-going. It's an infamous dress description.
I totally glazed over on that.
It's an infamous outfit description, I should say. It's more than just a dress. But RJ's really getting into the details here.
A little too much. Mostly I'm just finding that the Captain General is off doing her duties instead of protecting Elayne like she should be. Yep,
there's not much there. It's just this is, again, part of what makes the slog is we get lots of outfit descriptions. Here you go. I know we're skipping it a little bit for you guys, but also we're going to give it the love it deserves.
Mm-hmm. So it starts off with a meeting with Hal and Nori.
Yes. We've had our meeting with Mr. Harfor recently, and so now it's Nori's turn.
Right. And that's something we saw with Rand, where he met with the two of them like back to back, and that was really important in terms of day-to-day administration. I just feel like with him, it was like he had two meetings, and that was like the first 3 pages of a chapter, and then you have the whole rest of the chapter. With Elayne, that's 2 chapters.
Mm-hmm. Nodding.
And that's how we sort of are extending this out a little bit. So, he's got his leather folder to his chest. The description of Nori: tall and lean with a long, thin nose and a sparse fringe of hair rising behind his ears like a spray of white feathers. I can't help but think, remember that Pixar short with the guy playing chess against himself?
Yes.
That description is exactly what I think of Hal and Nori.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just something about stains on his shirt. I couldn't get anything out of that.
It's just a fun picture of him. It's just that nice sketch of he's still wearing his tabard from back when he actually wielded the pen, and he has such a good memory that he doesn't ever need his file folders, and he's such a mad scientist that his hair is a mess. Like, it's just a fun picture.
Giving some of our minor characters, we should stop for a second and appreciate, like, we're actually giving this minor character some interesting traits, which I feel like Jordan's really been, like, skipping on some of our minor characters lately. Mm-hmm. Even though he's been around before, it's like, let's take a moment, a beat or two, and talk about who these characters are before we just throw them, be like, oh yeah, here's 20 Andorran nobles and 6 Kyrianan nobles and some Shanshan and some sea folk, and, Salt Bay that shit right on top, right? Like,
yeah. And also he's elevating people who are not nobles, right? He's taking like the common people, the little people, and giving them more distinct personalities often than he ever gives to the nobles.
Yeah. I like that.
It's like the staff is more important than whoever's in office, right?
Like, right.
There was a great book I read a while back, I think called The Residents by Kate Anderson Brower, about the White House staff and how their like culture and dynamics have changed over the years, and what it's like to work in the White House kitchen for like 20 years. Because all these different presidents come and go, and all the different administrations and households, and like the ways that the White House staff like manages taking care of the president, but at a completely different level than like anything else. And I kind of think of that sometimes when we get into the staff of the palaces in the books, because I mean, obviously everyone knows the Downton Abbey upstairs, downstairs dynamic, right. But like, it really is interesting to think about all the people that exist underneath these very fast moving political things. There's like a whole glacial cityscape of people. I
mean, go back 20 years and you had Shail, Rand's mother, in charge. Mm-hmm. She left, Succession War. All people have careers that span all of that. I never thought about it. They go from Tigraine, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's the daughter heir. She's not the queen.
Sure, right. But I was thinking they go from her ruling to her son coming back and ruling over them. And they don't know it.
Right,
but,
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, they saw the first horseless carriage and the first airplane. But it's, they saw the daughter heir and the dragon reborn.
Or the Aiel War. And
yeah, that's more relevant, Right. The Aiel War through the coming of the dragon.
Right.
Like, that's a lot of history to live through. But yeah, like the people that, like, they were, in their 20s or 30s, and now they're only in their 50s or 60s. Like, that's a career.
Totally. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the people who were like, like born in 1900 and lived through 2 world wars and, the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
The Aiel War, the last battle, and, all the technical change that comes afterwards.
Mm-hmm. But what's fun with Master Nori is we get a discussion of economics.
Yes. Okay, and I discovered something about alum.
Alum, as the audiobooks call it.
Alum.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was aluminum.
Which makes no sense.
I don't know why, but like,
ALUM, I don't know.
I don't know, yeah. So I'm like, she discovered aluminum deposits on her land. She'll be able to, make aluminum, which is really valuable because aluminum's valuable and you can only make a tiny little bit of it. And that is not what it is in the slightest. And she even talks about it a little bit here about the purpose behind it. Dyers and weavers devoured alum, and so did glassmakers and paper makers, among others. But they don't say how they're using it. Mm-hmm. So I went to Wikipedia and looked up.
That's where all the best chemistry information is.
Absolutely. But at least where it was used. Alums have been used since antiquity and are still important in many industrial processes. The most widely used alum is potassium alum. It has been used since antiquity as a flocculant to clarify turbid liquids, as a mordant in dyeing, that's sort of a setting agent, and in tanning.
And what does it come from? It's been used since antiquity, so I'm assuming like you burn some stuff together and get like ash. It's a salt.
No, it's a salt. It's a salt that you deliberately just dig out of the ground.
It's just a salt. Okay.
It's a salt of potassium and aluminum.
Because aluminum is an element, not just that nonsense that we make airplanes and soda cans out of.
Right. It can actually react with things as well. Yeah.
Wow, cool. I've always read this section and been like, well, I know it's not aluminum because I know how aluminum gets made. But I have no idea what this is, and I'm never going to actually remember to Google it. So it's always been one of those weird question marks just floating on the page, like, I assume that it's a thing the Romans would have recognized, and I'm moving on. And apparently, yes, the Romans probably would have used this. Fascinating. So Elayne has discovered she has industrially important salt on some of her lands, and she's going to be able to mine them and sell that and change some of her industrial markets like entirely because she has salt.
But that's why dyers and weavers devoured alum. They're using it to set their dyes in their in the dye and in the weave. And so did glassmakers. It makes sense that maybe it was an additive to glass for coloration or for some sort of flux, I'm thinking. And paper makers is going to help set inks. Mm-hmm. And dye if you're dyeing your paper. So yeah, that totally makes sense as a the main purpose to be, what was the terminology? A mordant in dyeing, Mordant, which is mordant, just kind of close to more death a little bit.
A little bit.
Maybe that's where the Forsaken Snake comes from. The alum is a mordant.
I don't think that's what RJ meant.
Okay.
Fire Phoenix is saying in chat that the most important alums are potassium, sodium, and ammonium. So it's not just the one. There's multiple versions of this that get used in industry. Mm-hmm. Huh.
Potassium, I think, was just the one that was more common in quote-unquote antiquity.
Sure.
According to Wikipedia.
Interesting. And I am deliberately ignoring the comment in chat that says that aluminum has another eye. Because aluminium is just fun to say. It's not a real word.
Except in England. But they don't count.
No. And they have no rights to the English language whatsoever.
No. Speaking of which, I think Malkier Con is coming up. I don't know if we want to mention that at all.
I don't know if it will matter, given the lag we've got, but I did see a bunch of exploding happiness on Twitter that I guess, Malkier Con is happening or registration just closed. It's happening the first week of September, last week of August, something like that. Very excited for that. Very glad that it's happening. I imagine this episode will come out too late for that to help anyone find it. But
Maybe next year.
oh, someone in chat is saying that they're going. Luke Blightwalker is actually going to a con in person. Congratulations! One of us is going. Actually, probably multiple people who are fans of the podcast are going because Malkia talks as good people.
Yep.
And has a good audience.
Yep.
And yeah, I guess the schedule is up. That was the big exciting post, is that they have their schedule posted for Malkia Con.
Well, this is your FOMO notice. If you're hearing this, you probably missed out and you're not already going. But if not, go check it out.
Yeah.
If you're in England.
Or willing to travel there.
If you can be in England, I guess is the...
And the next thing I've got is sort of this internal thought of Elayne's about how Nori is trying to husband the gold for the time being, and she's trying to think about the future of Andor. She's kind of in this push-pull with him, where they both have really good points, but she wants to, like, invest in this academy, and he didn't, but the alum is gonna allow him to loosen the purse strings enough for her to do that. And so she has this whole thought about, like, stewarding the city now versus stewarding the city into the Fourth Age, stewarding the nation into the Fourth Age. Like, she's queen. She can't just think about the account books. That's Nori's job. She has to think about their legacy and do they manage to survive the last battle? Because she has a really unique thought in the Wheel of Time cast, which is that the world will exist after. Almost every character we ever exist with, and almost every piece of fan discussion that ever happens, is really focused on the Third Age. It's very rare to have someone who's like, I need to make decisions now because of the implications for the Fourth Age, for what comes after. It's very rarely thought about, but Elayne, as a queen, is like able to have that long view.
And that's what makes her a good queen, is having that long view and planning for it and making decisions that, will affect future generations as opposed to just the next quarter's profits.
Yeah, and it's especially relevant to a queen who's an Aes Sedai because she can literally live to see some of the implications.
That's true. That's an interesting thought, that would an Aes Sedai, someone long-lived, be a better ruler because they could see the long-term effects of their decisions?
Judging by the current experiment we're living through, I'd say no. But maybe if the mental faculties weren't declining within less than a century, we'd have a different outcome.
Well, and also if the people who are, 100 years old ruling over your country got to live in it for another couple hundred years.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Only getting to live for 100 years is a real limitation. Even if you hold on to power the whole time, you're not anticipating in another 2 centuries, I'm going to feel really bad about this. Yeah. Yeah. So
this is the Academy of the Rose, dedicated to the memory of Morgase Trakand.
Yes.
Which, okay, depending on how well she does in the Aiel camp, may or may not come true at this point. But yeah, do you think this survives the last battle?
Yeah.
Because Caemlyn is wiped out.
I bet this is one of the things that, like, New Caemlyn centers around. Because, Rand gets the academy started, and then Elayne dumps a bunch of energy into it. I bet that that's one of the lodestones that people are like, no, we will rebuild, if only to have a city to support this university.
Well, and this is not the university in Cairhien. The one in Cairhien is in Lord Barthanas' old manor that used to be an Ogier Grove that,
Right, this one doesn't even have a building yet.
This one, this is just like a couple of people meeting in, like, tavern rooms to hang out and talk about stuff.
Yeah. But, the town I went to college in basically existed because the college decided to plonk down where a couple of farmhouses were a little bit denser clustered than the others. I think that Caemlyn will rebuild around the fact that there's a center of learning there, and they will make it happen. But I also just came up with that headcanon off the top of my head right now. So
yeah, why not?
Maybe it's garbage. It's not well reasoned. I just like it.
It's a bold strategy destroying Camelot in the last battle. But I guess, maybe not. Maybe that is sort of, at the end of time, destroying Camelot was almost necessary. I have to go back and look into my Arthurian legends and see if that's, what actually happened.
Yeah, I don't know the fate of I'm not very up on my Arthurian legends ever. I don't know.
But I was pretty sure, like, the destruction of Camelot was, like, that's why we don't see Camelot anymore, is it got destroyed, right?
It's very convenient if you can't find the ruins because it's been destroyed.
People are confirming that Camelot is destroyed.
But also, they're reminding us that London, got burned to the ground.
There's been a fair number of U.S. cities, too, that have pretty much burned to the ground. Chicago, yeah. It was
San
the one
Francisco.
That came to mind. Yep. And people just, I mean, if you're there and it's in the right spot, and you have the resources, at, like, free land, right? Like,
well, and I mean, people don't build cities in any old spot. You build cities in really good locations, so you're not inclined to up and move. Like, I know when that one guy found the city of Troy, he didn't just find one city of Troy. He found like 7 cities of Troy, or subsequent archaeologists. There's like 7 because the city kept getting fucked and then kept getting rebuilt because it's a really strategic port location at the time.
And I would argue that people do build cities everywhere. That's why there are a million small towns all over the place. But in order for like a small town to grow, the better spot it's in, the bigger it's going to get.
Yeah,
and so I'd
city
say,
as opposed to town. Yeah.
Right. But like I would say the evolution of a city is an evolution, right? You have all these settlements, and the ones that succeed and do well become cities, and the ones that just putter along become little towns and villages.
Sure. But places that are rich and prosperous don't lose the reasons for that.
Right,
just
exactly.
because the people and buildings are gone.
Exactly. And so that's where you sort of have this like evolution of like, well, you have this natural growth that happens at that spot because it's being fed and watered and trade goes through there, and people, that's why Manetheren became Two Rivers grew up again, right? During the last battle, because it's sort of, once you can get over those mountains, it's kind of in the center of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. The next item of news that is of worth is Elayne's proclamation. This is Elayne's first time hearing of Elayne's proclamation about anathema on anyone who approaches the dragon except through me. This is her absorbing and thinking about that information.
And do we remember when that proclamation was made?
I think the last time we were with Elayne, not that long ago.
Okay, so it's not that long ago. Yeah,
I think literally the last chapter with Elayne was her being forced to sign that.
Gotcha. That I always feel like that happens so early on, but it has to happen after Rand gets kidnapped.
Yeah, it feels like it should go along with the kidnapping, but it actually comes much later. It's like kind of like, well, he's already declared anathema on you because of the whole kidnapping thing. So it's like, he fired you, but actually you quit. Like, is that what we're dealing with here?
Well, I mean, we all know it's just Alviarin on the orders of Mesa Ana, sowing chaos and trying to make sure that, like, doing their best to keep people from approaching Rand and allying with him.
Right, which is basically what Elayne maps out here, aside from knowing who's pulling the strings. She's like, all this is going to do is ruin everything diplomatically. She can't think this makes sense, and yes, Elayne, you're correct. But then there's this whole thing about Nori is trying to figure out why Rand vanished, and maybe it's because he accepted the thing, because Nori is at the beginning of becoming a spy master. I think he actually gets spy masterified by the end of the series. Like, it starts out here like, oh no, he would never consider that, but he like actively works on that skill, I think, does. Over the course of the rest of the books.
He like recruits eyes and ears, definitely. Yeah, he goes from having like a few correspondents that he talks to just so he can have, make updated decisions, to actually having like people who report to him. Because oh no, never mind. I was gonna say, doesn't he get somebody's eyes and ears? But I think he just develops his own.
Yeah, he just has his own network that he doesn't develop properly until somewhere around here he suddenly wants to up his game a little bit more.
And I love this line. I myself would not believe him dead unless I sat 3 days with the corpse.
So much foreshadowing.
Well, and just the fact that Jesus was dead for 3 days before he resurrected. It's almost a reference to the resurrection myth without actually like Nori knowing about it, right?
Legends fade to myth. You gotta sit 3 days with the corpse. Otherwise, And also, nobody sits with Rand's body for 3 days, and thus it gets up and walks away. Well, I mean, technically it's Moradin's body, but like, the body he's in is not guarded to make sure it's dead.
Right. Which we'll have to talk about that when we get there, because why wouldn't you guard more than... Yeah, right?
We do not have time right now.
No. That's way later. But yeah, no, I saw that 3 days of the corpse, and I was just like, Jesus, Rand.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about what happens in the next paragraph when Elayne says, a great many difficulties could be surmounted if only he could bring himself to kneel to Egwene. Like, what? When has that ever come up? When would the dragon kneeling to the Amyrlin helping ever have come up? Like, what great difficulties is she referring to?
I think the uniting of the White Tower, that like acknowledging Egwene as the Amyrlin seat. I think it's just one of those offhanded, like...
It's like no one ever asked him. No one ever said if only the dragon could acknowledge the Amyrlin, then like... This is the first I'm hearing about that, and Elaine's saying it like it's this offhand, it's always been true, and I just... You don't got anything? Make it make sense?
I think she's just like, it would be great if he did, but no one's even thought to ask him, because we all know he won't. Right? Like, we're not dumb like Elida. Like, you know, there'd be a great many difficulties if Trump could kneel to, you know, Schumer or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, you know, he's never going to do it. They're political enemies, even though they're childhood friends. It doesn't make sense for him.
I guess I just don't see what it would help. Like, who does that help? I don't see why the White Tower would unify behind Egwene.
I think it has. I think one way to think about it is she's just like, well, if he knelt to Egwene could tell him what to do, and that would solve all sorts of problems, because women are better at men than making decisions. So I think we're in that level of, you know, the characters are like, I'm a man, he's a woman.
So that's why it doesn't make sense, is because it's dumb.
Right.
Okay. All right. It's that nonsense gendered whatever that is. Okay. I just was making sure I hadn't missed some actual plot instead of just... No.
Okay, it's just her thinking that, like, it would be better for everybody if Rand was subservient to Egwene, who's totally the best person ever and a woman, which is great.
All right. Casual misandry. Got it.
I don't know.
All right. I wanted it to be something better than that.
Uh-huh.
All right.
See, she thinks the worst possible attack could be the Ashaman, which it was.
She thinks about starting a royal post. Fun little nod to the fact that royal posts are important.
I wanted to ask, like, how does she know what a royal post is? Is that just like something that was around and fell apart? Is that's sort of what I'm thinking of? Is like
I think it was an Arthur Hawkwing era thing. Maybe. Right. He's got the whole like Pox Arthur Hawkwing Monica thing where a child can ride with a bag of gold from one end to the other thing. So maybe there was a post back at that time.
That makes sense. I actually seem to remember them talking about how, like, you could send a letter from one side of the empire to the other, no problem, or something like that. You might actually be right. There might actually be a line to that effect. Yeah. It would certainly fit with what we know of giant empires that have had that myth about them before in our timeline. They generally have posts. Right. And I could see where maybe they had posts on a smaller scale. They just didn't have the royal one across. Like a little regional, like around Whitebridge or something like that. Yeah. We've got seafolk ships who are sailing into Tyr. I assume they're just there for Rand. Right, yeah. There's, what are the seafolk doing? Probably something to do with the dragon. Elayne was quiet and full of Rand's soldiers recovering from the battle against the Seanchan. We just saw that was the end of the last book. They're currently, like, nursing all their wounds, because that was, again, like, a week ago. So, big battle a week ago. They're resting. And then we got this big paragraph about how all of the Borderlander kings are missing, which is foreshadowing the end of this chapter when we find out they're all in her forest. They're in Braem Forest. Yeah. Wait, it's not the Borderlanders that are in her forest, is it? I thought that was the Mirandians. It's the whole discussion about the Mirandian, like, he aims at Mirandia itself thing. I didn't catch if the Borderlanders were in that. Because I know that they're somewhere around here. Oh, it's Rand, I'll wager. Yeah. Okay. King Rohirrim is gathering on the border of the Andors. He's not in the woods in Andor. King Rohirrim... Rohirrim is Mirandian. Yeah. And he's on the border, and that's that whole, like, oh, no, don't worry, I know what he's doing. He's just, you know, because he's got the Band of the Red Hand with him.
Right. It's when Dyelin bursts in at the end.
Yeah.
That's the news about the Borderlanders.
Exactly.
There's too many armies in the Braem Woods. Too many. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just the Borderlanders in Braem Woods.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a lot of RJ doing a fourth wall break and saying, yeah, I know it's recap. I know. Elayne's ahead of it. Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of that, like, oh, yeah, here's all the news from where all the armies are. Let me just give that to the queen as a recap. So can we say Nori is the official, like, king of recap right now?
Yeah.
Like, he walks in with his folders and goes, okay, here's the recap of where all the armies are.
Yeah, this is like the most boring cold open to an episode ever. Yeah. But there's a really cool thing about this interaction at the end, which is that Elayne explains to Nori what's actually happening, right? Nori gives her these disconnected facts. She puts them together. And then Nori says, oh, I forgot to mention this thing that's really critical and important. And I obviously didn't forget it because I'm smarter than that. And Elayne has this question that I am also with her on, that of what is Nori's game here? What is he wanting to see how she performs under pressure? Does he not want to support her too openly? Like what is going on with him giving her this information after she shows how smart she is and not giving it to her before? What's up with that?
I think he wants to make sure she's a good enough queen for Andor before he gives her Cairhien. Before he... it might also be just something he's a little nervous about, and so it's like you always wait to bring up the thing you're nervous about till the end, so you don't have to deal with it the whole conversation. But yeah, I think it's more just... hey, you're new at this. Like, she is still gathering the loyalty of the people who are working under her. Like, they may have pledged to her, but they might not be super like, well, I don't know, she's kind of a spoiled girl, and Morghese was kind of crazy at the end, and, I know she's got a good claim, but where the hell has she been all these months? Like, there's a lot of reasons why he might not spread. Oh, and I like this one. I'm sorry, how do I pronounce that?
In my head, it's Iacona, but I have no idea if that's right.
Okay. Wait for a second. Iacona. You nailed it.
Yes. I know we were hanging out at WatCon, but does that mean I know your name? No.
Thank you for the pronunciation guide. Names are hard. So Iacona says, I think he second guesses after she shows she has sources of information he does not. Right? So maybe she already knows about the Cairhien and she might, question his loyalty if he withholds that information.
Kind of like how Egwene impresses Moggy in Saladar. Same dynamic.
Same dynamic of like...
you don't know what I know. Dun,
exactly.
Dun, dun, dun.
And you should probably just share it with me.
Yeah. I've always interpreted it as just Nori being not quite sure about her, but it seems to me like he throws in with her so thoroughly later. It's like, why didn't you help her out here? But yeah, maybe it's just a matter of better to let you stumble and fall now on the easy shit. Right. While Dyelin can easily pick up the pieces and put it back together than helping an inexperienced person get us into a place where she can really undo all my hard work keeping stuff together since Morghese went off the deep end.
And Dyelin has no claim on Cairhien.
And it makes sense for Halwa Nori to hoard his queen, right? And tell Cairhien to go get their own queen. He has one to steward over here if he doesn't have to give her up. If it might overstretch Andor's resources to take on two kingdoms, it makes sense for him to be like, nope, we're cutting our losses and keeping the ancestral heartland. Again, as Grace says, as Fire Phoenix says, the staff have so much power.
They do. And what they share with you, what they don't. I mean, that's always been true of great heads of state, like you need someone there to provide you with the information and to enforce your decrees, right? That's the whole Elida's problem. One of her problems in the White Tower is everything she does gets slow walked by the people around her, and they don't provide her the information. Like the eyes and ears in the hall aren't giving her any information. She's isolated and ineffective as a leader because that's what the people around her want her to be.
It does make you wonder when people are so-called bad leaders and yet the systems around them keep functioning smoothly, just like everything's fine. Makes you wonder. Deep state. So Elayne basically composes a note to Kyria and telling them to please not show up and topple her entire power structure. Because basically the offer is, hey, we could come show up as an occupying force and give you your throne, and then everything would be fine, right? And she's like, how about no?
How about no? And how about I'll show up on your doorstep, and I promise not to bring one of my occupying armies, and then you can give me the throne. How's that sound?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very diplomatic.
And Master Nora's like, oh, you remind me of your mother. That was quite clever.
Yeah.
Which, I assume that's a compliment.
I suspect it's a compliment. That sounds like whatever the fuck happened at the end, your mother.
Right.
It's the kind of thing that Elayne was trained to do and that she should be doing. She's proving that she's at least up to par with this stuff.
It might also be, you're trying to take over 2 kingdoms at the same time? You're fucking nuts. You remind me of your mother.
I don't think that's what he means, but the subtext is open. As she says, a compliment is not the same thing as a declaration of fealty. Right. An implied compliment is only implied. So. Right.
And that might be how, he could be being like, yes, you remind me of your mother. And if anyone asks, he's like, well, she reminded me of her mother. She was crazy at the end. Like, there's a way to get out of that.
Yeah. So he leaves and food comes in, and we get one of RJ's only Song of Ice and Fire moments where he actually describes food. It's one of the only things I liked about Song of Ice and Fire was the food descriptions.
Well, we got the scene in the tower when Matt wakes up.
Yeah. Such a good scene.
Such a good scene.
This is nothing on that.
No, because she doesn't eat any of the food. We don't get the cathartic. We don't get to enjoy it vicariously. She eats the broth and stale bread.
This is the most ridiculous meal. For me, middle of the day makes the most sense for me. That's when I'm going to be awake to digest it for a long time. I hate eating tons of food before I go to bed.
Although I will agree with her on this one. If I'm trying to be active and I eat a bunch of food and I get sleepy in the middle of the day when I'm at work, that can be troublesome.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But if I get sleepy because I have no blood sugar, I'm still passing out. Mm-hmm. No, lunch is the worst meal to time around the rest of the stuff I have to do in the day. I feel her annoyance. I just can't imagine actually taking the time to eat and then eating such an inconsequential meal. If I'm going to break my day up, I'm going to invest in not having to do this again for a while. With clear broth? What is this? Like, you're the chef. What's clear broth?
If you ever bought a thing of vegetable broth or chicken broth in a can and used that?
I try very hard not to.
Oh, do you make your own?
We go more with like the bouillon paste.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It keeps much better.
Fair enough. But chicken stock, right? That's all I think of it is. It's just chicken stock or chicken broth, right? It's just they filtered out all of the chunks out of what is basically chicken soup.
Okay, first of all, that's not clear. That's amber, but whatever.
Well, okay. Now we can talk about color and we can talk about opacity because those are different things.
That's true. That is true. As is translucency. Yet a third thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's a terrible meal, though. We can agree on that. There's like an actual good spread of food, and then she decides to have poison and boring food.
Yeah, she enjoys her appetizer.
Yeah. And she even doesn't take a little bit of the cake, and then she thinks, oh, I should have had a little bit of the cake. And it's like, Elayne, are you feeling okay? You didn't take the sugary thing first? Like, sure you're feeling all right?
That's a good point. Where is Elayne's sweet tooth? What is going on?
It comes back later. But not here. Oh, and now people in chat are actually posting a link to a clear broth recipe. Fine. I sit corrected. God. It's one link. I'm being so ridiculous.
Maybe Elayne only craves the sweets after smoking some Two Rivers tobacco.
That is the best time to indulge a sweet tooth.
Or after channeling. Could there be some sort of
like blood sugar drop?
Blood sugar drop from channeling, and that's what causes her to want sweets because she uses up a bunch of energy.
I like that. Oh, and Keith did point out that she was shamed about eating sugar 2 chapters ago.
Was that Brigida who was shaming her?
No, that was the whole First Sister ceremony.
Oh, that was Javienda. That's right.
So maybe she's just a little bit more gun shy of it at this moment.
Sensitive. Yeah, maybe that's why she's eating just bread and broth because she's because Avienda was if she keeps gobbling sweets, she's going to get fat. Now she's okay, diet.
Right, yeah. And she's following Linny's advice, which makes her look thin as a rail, which is about to be a problem once everyone knows she's pregnant and starts managing her diet for her, which will happen this book, I think. She gets pregnant this book. I think she starts getting harassed about it this book as well.
No way. It's got to be next book.
Really?
There's no way the timelines line up. There's no way she can get pregnant and start showing.
Well, but like they spilled the news about it way before she's showing, because of the 3 other people getting drunk and talking about it. Like everyone knows she's pregnant long before she's showing.
Right. I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, like Brigida already knows. Well, I mean, she will know once it happens.
I'm just thinking of the compressed timeline. That, like, we've only got 2 months to the end of Knife of Dreams. That's barely enough time to anybody to know they're pregnant. Most people don't even know they're pregnant until 6 weeks after they get pregnant. Because, just the way pregnancies work and the timing associated with the periods. Mm-hmm. Like, does Min see that she's pregnant? Is that...
Yeah, that's why it happens. It's because Min, Avi, and Brigida are all drunk as fuck, and Min says she's gonna get pregnant from this. You don't think Brigida's gonna forget that?
I guess that's a good point. They know she's getting pregnant the night she has sex with Rand.
They know she's pregnant. So the ability to start harassing her about her diet is like day one.
Magical prophecies. Because knowing you're pregnant, because that's even before because like it takes a week or so to get pregnant.
Yeah, she doesn't know she's pregnant, and she's already being told how to eat when it happens. And she's like, I'd like to think I'm pregnant, but I don't know yet. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
So I think that happens in this book.
That's fair.
Certainly the conception happens in this book. So tea, lightly minty. And as Elayne is drinking her tea, Dyelin comes running in with the news that there's a Borderlander army in Braem Wood. And Dyelin is literally running and flustered. This is a very big deal.
Which it turns out not to be for us. But,
sure.
I mean, it is that they're looking for Rand and he has to go to them. And it's a good thing they don't find him before Veins of Gold.
Right. But it looks like an invading force is about to cross over the border of Andor. Tens of thousands of Borderlanders is no joke.
And I remember just how much speculation. What the fuck are the Borderlanders doing? Why are they like? There's because we don't know. We do not know at all at this point in the series until they actually tell Rand. Like it is very well hidden secret from us, the readers, that they are looking for Rand. And we can make speculation, but back in the day when these books came out, that was a big point of speculation. Like, what the hell are the Borderlanders doing? Like, what? Are they in rebellion? Are they mad? Are they pro-Rand? Like, what's going on? Remember, this all came out because of Huron.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because Huron goes to the Borderlanders and he tells them and he triggers the prophecy. But if Huron hadn't spent all that time with Rand and been there for...
The Great Hunt. Everything in the Great Hunt. Particularly Falma, but everything before.
I was say the Battle of Falma, yeah. I don't think they would have gone off to... and taken it seriously.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've seen doing the podcast, the foreshadowing is real thin on the ground for that. RJ did not want anyone to figure out what was going on there. No. I don't think. There's nothing obvious as we've gone through it. There's only clues that make sense in hindsight.
And even they are like not really clues so much as like, oh, I know now why they made those decisions, but... Yeah,
exactly. It's not... They're not clues. Yeah. He gives us POVs, but it's just random. It's like, even with a full spoilers perspective, it's like, yeah, that's pretty random.
I mean, and it makes sense when you hear about it. It's not like you're like, oh my God, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, they had a prophecy and they're following the prophecy and, the news, the cause and effect makes sense to us and why it's a secret and everything like that. But man, it would have been nice to get a POV from one of the leaders to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to go find the Dragon Reborn because of that thing. And then we would have been like, what thing? But...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Elayne, knowing Rand and knowing the world, is just like, I don't know what's going on, but it's probably about Rand. Very first, most obvious Occam's razor answer.
It's about Rand, yeah.
Correct.
Same reason the Shan-Chan are coming in up the hills. The same thing about the Ashaman.
It's always about Rand.
It's always about Rand. Basically, everything going on in the world right now is about Rand.
And Dyelin thinks that that's more of like a political comment, whereas Elaine's just like, nah, it's the world. It's Rand. It's fine. But in attempting to articulate that thought, she suddenly is feeling the effects of the fork root and, is suddenly not able to function at all and tells Dyelin that she's been poisoned because that is close enough to the truth for the amount of words she can say at this point.
Right.
And there's this really cool strung out moment of tension where you don't know if Dyelin is why she was poisoned or not. Elayne is convinced that Dyelin is there to assassinate her, and she's turning to meet her henchmen. And it's right up until Dyelin starts screaming bloody murder at the top of her lungs. Like, you don't know. And every time it comes up in the audiobook, I just love how much Dyelin was always a ride or die for Elayne. You don't trust her until that moment, and then she goes at this man with a sword holding a little belt knife, just like, she's a noble woman, and she rushes to meet the assassin. It's so badass.
It kind of reminds me of the situation where Rand goes down and the two women are standing over him discussing whether or not to kill him.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same situation that just happened with him, except sort of with the opposite result, because they totally would have killed him if they could have gotten away with it.
But it's the same tension of, like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And then with Rand's situation, it's not really clear, but it was probably bad. And in this situation, you get just this resounding Dyelin is a ride or die, and we love her.
Right. Well, and let's not gloss over the fact that this is not an actual attempt to kill or assassinate or kidnap Elayne. This is an attempt to get Mellar into her inner circle.
This is a false flag to gain trust.
Yep. She's not technically in any danger.
Dylan's definitely in danger. Dyelin easily could have fallen in this conflict.
Totally. Oh, yeah.
But Elayne never was in danger.
And Dyelin basically did. Like, that was a killing blow. If Nynaeve hadn't shown up and healed her from that blow, she would have died.
Yeah, and if she'd been hit with the poisoned knife, we learned later that one of the knives was poisoned, and if that had been the knife that hit Dyelin, then she also would have died. So yeah, Elayne was the only safe person in this room. Well, Elayne and Mellar, technically.
Yeah, right. Well, I forgot about the poison knife.
Yeah, we'll get to that when she wakes up, but yeah.
And then, I guess technically the poor assassins, right? They're going there with the job.
No
and
sympathy.
Their boss starts stabbing you in the back.
They think that they're there for a real assassination mission. They don't know that they're there to die, to get Mellar into the good graces. They think they're there to kill her.
And I do have to give Mellar a little bit of props for that sword throw. And then, he did take on 3 people and kill them.
He's a very accomplished warrior, and he picked idiots to be his fall guys. He picked really incompetent people to be his fall guys.
Yeah, that's fair.
He is that kind of... He wouldn't put himself against real opponents. No.
Well, and they're incompetent because they waited to see if she could channel. It's like, no, you don't wait to see if she can channel, because if she can channel, you're fucked. You rush her as quickly as you can the second you get into the room. Yeah,
exactly. And I think they were probably dark friends, but they were just some random bouncers. They weren't proper soldiers. I mean, not to disparage Lamgwin and all the other good bouncers out there, but
right.
No,
definitely dark friends, right? Without a doubt, right? I don't think there's any reason for...
to attack the daughter heir, yeah.
Right, yeah. Keith's asking, dark friends or patsies? I'm saying both, right? They're yeah.
Very low level red shirt dark friends. And Elayne has this wonderful line, "I will not die like a kitten in a sack," as she prepares to absolutely die like a kitten in a sack.
Basically, yeah.
Fork root is far too effective for willpower alone to get through. If willpower got you through, Nynaeve never would have been taken with this stuff, right? We know willpower, it won't get you through, but she refuses to die without at least being angry about it.
It's kind of when people are being put under with anesthesia. I was going to say anesthesiologist, but that's the person who does it, not the drug. Yeah. No, and they're like, I'm not going to go under. And they okay, count back from 10. 10, 9, out. Will makes no difference. The drug will knock you out.
Yeah.
You can't will yourself to be awake through that stuff. So back to the books.
Basically, I have the readout.
Yeah, I think so. Dyelin takes a hit. It looks like she's not breathing, but we find out later that she does survive and is healed by Nynaeve.
She's actively dying, but isn't dead yet.
Right. Not dead yet. Bring out your dead. It's just Nynaeve with a wheelbarrow. Bring out your dead. Healed. Bring out your dead. Healed.
Yeah, that's totally how Nynaeve would do it. She actually never carts anyone away because she just heals them as dead.
Then puts them back.
Yeah.
She's just walking along. Bring out your dead. I'm not dead yet. Oh, good. Then I've got you.
Right. And then this is one of the few chapters that ends on a cliffhanger. RJ doesn't normally do cliffhangers, but this is like a textbook cliffhanger of a chapter ending, which is fun.
I feel like he used to do more of them in the early books. I feel like now he's really gotten to the point where he's wrapping up story. I don't know, what's a cliffhanger? Because a lot of times he just goes right into the next moment. Is that not a cliffhanger?
A cliffhanger is when you don't know what happens next. Like because she's thinking, help me, Brigida, hurry, as her assassin is struggling with a guardsman, and then darkness closes in. So you're like, is she going to wake up in a prison cell? Is she going to wake up, like, being, given a cesarean section by this guy? Because that's going to happen in a few books.
I mean, in fairness, her waking up in a cell is not an unreasonable outcome based on the series of history of the books.
Right. And I mean, yes, it opens on the next chapter. It's the cliffhanger lasts for the entirety of the time it takes to turn the page. But nonetheless, he normally just leaves on some nice concluding, thought to think about. This is actually like an action cliffhanger, which is kind of unusual.
And this is where I think this book would have benefited for interweaving some of these stories rather than just telling them all in a row. Because this, I think, would have been a more effective cliffhanger if then we'd cut to Rand for a while or cut to Perrin for a while and told some of Perrin's story, right?
Exactly.
Or if this was chapter 2 instead of chapter 9 and we didn't have to get through, and then put this in the middle of Perrin stuff, right? I think that would have made a much more effective editing process instead of the big blocks.
Yeah.
Big blocks of plot.
Taking these first 9 chapters and rearranging them would have done wonders for the sense of slogginess. Yeah. All right, so I guess I'll read this last paragraph. Staggering, Elayne fell to her knees and barely caught the edge of the table again to stop herself falling further. Amazed, she stared at the man bleeding onto the carpets. There was a sword hilt sticking out of his back. Her leaden thoughts were wandering. Those carpets might never come clean with all that blood. Slowly, she raised her eyes, past the motionless form of Dyelin. She did not appear to be breathing. To the door, the open door. One of the remaining 2 assassins lay in front of it, his head at an odd angle, only half attached to his neck. The other was struggling with another red-coated man, the pair of them grunting and rolling on the floor, both striving for the same dagger. The would-be killer was trying to pry the other man's fist from his throat with his free hand. The other, a man with a face like an axe, in the white-collared coat of a guardsman. Hurry, Brigida, she thought dully. Please hurry. Darkness consumed her.
And remember, this guy's name is David Hanlon or Dolan Mellar.
Yeah, it goes by either. I don't believe either is his real name. I don't think he has a real name.
Yeah, not very often.
I think when we're in his POV, he refers to himself as Hanlon.
And that's his name when he's working for Torm Riotin. Mm-hmm. And then Dolan Mellar is his name when he shows up in Caitlin. No idea which one's the original.
Yeah, it's, I don't think it matters, He's just a changeable, terrible person.
But I often think of him as our new Bors.
Yes.
I almost want to give him the mantle of Bors. It's just that Bors wouldn't be very effective in this situation because he's a White Cloak. And so I feel like Jordan had to no, I don't want a White Cloak anymore, but I still want that bad guy who's a dark friend who can do bad things to queens. So I'm going to kill Bors in front of Mellar and just have them sort of swap places.
Yeah, and he watches Bors die. I mean, the torch baton gets passed.
Is passed.
In that
absolutely.
scene. When he looks at the guy and wonders who the man was. And I'm like, he's the prior iteration of you, evil bad guy.
And and Mellar's death is just so epic. Brigida coming back with the horn,
standing over her own corpse.
It's wonderful.
It's so good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I don't like fake out deaths very often, but that was so fist pumpingly good. I think I might have been cheering out loud the first time I heard it. Going through the books, it was so good.
And it doesn't make her not dead either, which I also like about it.
Yeah, totally. It's just like, I can still kill you, motherfucker. Even though I'm dead, I can still kill you. But yeah, this is when he really signs his death warrant when he performs this assassination attempt and gets into the Queen's Guard, because at that point, he's on a collision course with Brigida that will end in his death. Even if he gets to kill her first. But this is the beginning of their collision course.
That's one of my favorite memes, is Mo throwing Barney out of Mo's tavern, and then and Barney appearing behind him, and just, obviously Brigida and Mela are. Mela's like, Brigida, get out of here! And she's like, nope, I'm behind you now.
Yep. And nobody likes him, at all, but he manages to last long enough to be able to screw things up really bad. I never quite understood why Elayne goes with him as a trustworthy person because of this. It seems so obvious.
Well, he rescued her, right? Which is like, okay, she's given Dyelin a pass for helping to save her.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And then, she's desperately looking for mercenaries she can trust. She's so low on men. She's recruiting everybody she possibly can. And 3, he's a little misogynistic in the beginning, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad guy.
That's true. Yeah.
When you're dealing with the dregs, you're just going to be like, that's not great, but as long as he fights for us,
Yeah, no, that's true. It's just, can't you see the dark aura pouring off of him that Nin pointed out?
Yeah. Well, and then at some point she does start using him and realizes that he is a bad guy, but he's in such a position of power that it's going to be difficult without a lot of proof to get rid of him. And so that's where she has all the people follow him who keep dying. And that's a whole thing where she has to verify that he's evil. And once she does, then she has a whole plan to get rid of him.
That goes so badly. And then she has that whole weird thing where she uses him as the decoy father for her pregnancy. And it's just like, literally, why?
I don't think that was her choice. I think he started those rumors, and she, without actively saying, no, it's this other person who fathered them, it was easier to just be like, oh yeah, totally, it was his baby, rather than...
No, she fucking starts the rumors. Remember, she gives him that warm look and wink, and then it turns around to Avienda and says, I did it because there was a maid right there. There's a whole conversation about that. I mean, Mellar might have been bragging. No, yeah, it's totally a whole conversation that happens. Elayne very deliberately picks him as a good foil, and I remain perplexed by that choice to this day, because there's probably a few other men in her staff that would have worked.
Nori?
No, some stable boy or something. It's tradition to be rolling in the stables with one of the lowest ranked people. That's classic.
So she should have been fetch me that jar, farm boy.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. It is a time-honored classic.
It's actually not hard to see Elayne as not Princess Buttercup from, that is kind of who she reminds me of in terms of the strawberry blonde hair, the stuck up, the nose up in the air, the arrogance, but also the competence.
Yeah. Yeah, the blonde princess that's not completely two-dimensional, but mostly.
Right.
Yeah.
As you wish.
I've only actually ever seen that movie once, but it's one of those things that the amount of quotes and memes about it is I've basically seen it multiple times.
I rewatched it this month with Never. She hadn't seen it as an adult. And so I was like, no, and it does hold up. It's one of those movies that no, it holds up. It's worth it. It's not like a kid's movie that you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be good. Nope, it just turns out it's terrible. It's no, these jokes are funny. This movie holds up. It was overplayed for a while, but definitely worth it. And then we've been reading through the book, which I remember being great. And I don't know if I talked about this. I opened up the book because it's got more backstory for some of the characters. And the introduction part, where the character is sort of talking about his life before his grandfather reads him the book, has some really problematic racist things in it.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I was like, oh. And I was like reading it out loud. And I'm like, I don't think I want to say that. I'm just going to skip over that sentence. I think that's... Yeah. So something about like Chinese yellow people or something like that. Like, and some other things of that. One or two other things of that nature.
Well, given all the racism towards Sicilians... It just goes outwards from there.
Right. So it's like, there's a little bit of problematic stuff in there. So, but I did want to say it's got a lot more backstory about like Fezzik and the other minor characters.
That's cool.
On that note,
yeah, kill recording
as you wish.
And yeah, so Seth has now prepared a cup of tea. For this chapter.
It's minty.
Which is a cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, it had to happen, right? Like, there was I usually drink tea anyway, so. Well,
we know that if you pass out in the middle of the recording, then we're going to need to send in a rescue squad.
if my audio just kicks out, it's not because I passed out. It's because, it's not because I dropped signal.
Well, I hate mint, so I would never be tricked by this. I'm safe.
You know, I actually like a little bit of mint in other teas. Like, this is actually a black tea, but it's got a little bit of mint in it.
Yeah, I just hate mint as a thing. I have a weird fondness for sleepy time tea from Celestial Seasonings because I was forcibly given it as a child so often.
Same. Yeah.
But that's different. And then, like, very occasional. Okay, so occasionally in like Middle Eastern, Mediterranean food with like lamb, there's a context in which mint works. I don't like mint. Though apparently I do like mint because I put oregano on breakfast this morning and it was really good. And oregano is in the mint family.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Disappointing. Yeah, disappointingly. Oregano, which is an excellent herb.
You're like, no, you've ruined it.
I don't like mint except when
you do.
It's a really giant family. There's a lot of different things that are technically mint. But what most people think of as mint, I think, is the actual devil's lettuce and should go like the way of the dodo. Get out.
Isn't the same way with like broccoli? Like broccoli is technically like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli.
Yeah,
just a massive category of food.
Yeah. Broccoli is one of them.
Yes.
It's not the original, but yes, the original wild mustard plant, I think it is like the original. There's a really cool graphic out there with like 8 different well-known vegetables that all come from the same weedy, nondescript plant. And it's just a matter of which piece of the plant got bred to look ridiculous.
To be big, yeah. To be edible. Yeah. It's like the whole plant's edible, but we just have different parts of it that like we blew up.
Yeah, it's a super cool and also slightly disturbing fact of the vegetable world that you're eating like 3 vegetables, 3 different families, basically. Like, have you ever tried to help someone find a good dish to eat that doesn't include nightshades?
It's hard, yeah.
It's so hard. Every good thing is a nightshade. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. I mean, potatoes and tomatoes. Super unfair. How are you supposed to have good food without potatoes or tomatoes?
You can't have pizza, you can't have pasta sauce, you can't have gnocchi, you can't have, I mean, and I know, why is gnocchi on the top like 3? I don't know, but it's up there.
Yes, the image is in chat. That is the one.
Mm-hmm.
Brassica oleracea? I'm not saying that right.
Names are hard.
But yeah, you've got cabbage, which is selection for terminal buds. Brussels sprouts, which is a selection for lateral buds. Kohlrabi, which is a selection for stem. Kale, which is a selection for leaves. Broccoli is a selection for stems and flowers. And cauliflower, which is a selection for flower clusters. That all comes from a very nondescript looking plant called Brassica oleracea.
We have some very weird eating habits, our ancestors. Like, I can look at modern plants and go like, okay, yeah, that's food. But who looked at that original plant and went, you know what? If we it's kind of edible. And if we breed it together, we can make a bunch of the different parts. I mean, I know no one looked at it and made that plan, but like...
Mm-hmm. A hunter-gatherer with just enough extra time on their hands and enough of a repeatable route through the same area. And a little just, what if I poked at helping this one thing grow better than the other?
Yeah.
And it's all been downhill from there.
Yeah. Although you were saying, I think you were encouraged by the latest climate change bill that passed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that got signed by Biden today, but the exciting moment was when it actually passed and was headed to his desk. Mm-hmm. And that was a couple days ago. And I it's hard to be optimistic about even following the news about this kind of stuff. But I had heard in various podcasts that, like, if this thing doesn't get passed, then, like, climate change is an absolute non-starter. We're never going to deal with it in, like, all these really important critical thresholds. Like, the math just doesn't pencil out. And then it finally gets passed, you know, by the skin of someone's teeth and a whole bunch of bribing Joe Manchin. And then Hank Green did a really cool, like, 20-minute video about it where he actually interviewed a couple of people and, like, did a really good discussion of why he's feeling optimistic. And I've followed him for years. I'm basically the same age as him. I agree with him about most things. Like, it's very hard not to co-sign onto his optimism after listening to his video essay on why we should be optimistic.
I watched that video after you posted about it, but it would have popped up in my feed anyway. And yeah, it was nice to see him be optimistic. I'm still, I think, more skeptical than he is that A, any of that's actually going to go to where it's supposed to, and B, that it's going to make enough of a difference.
But
yeah.
It is something. It's one more
something.
kick of the can
Right.
down the road, at least.
At least we are, like, it seems like people are actually taking this seriously. People are realizing legislation needs to pass. We need to change habits. I'm just afraid it's a little too late to really mitigate the worst of the effects. Now, I'm not going to say it's too late to do anything, right? Obviously, like, the sooner we do stuff, you know, the best time to do something was, you know, in the 1950s. The second best time to do something is today, right? Like, there's no other way we can fix this problem. But, you know, I think we're certainly going to see long-term effects of climate change.
We are seeing long-term effects of climate change. And I think the thing with this is just that, you know, we can't sit back on our laurels and say, aha, we did it. No, we have to keep holding their feet to the fire to actually do what they said they're going to do. You know, like, there will never in our lifetimes be a moment where we can relax and trust that the system's just going to keep on doing the right thing, right? Like, but this is nonetheless, like, if this didn't get passed, we would be facing a much more dire set of policy and protest options than we are now facing.
Right.
Like, I think I saw another tweet from Hank Green that was like, you have no idea the amount of projects that just went from impossible to possible because of the funding. Like, projects that people have built, have imagined, have constructed, and they just need the money. Mm-hmm. And, like, this means that is now a possibility. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it's going to be hard to make sure that it gets actualized, but it is now possible. So, you know, little optimism that I'm just choosing to indulge in.
Yeah, I'm just going to drain that right out. Just
no.
And I guess that's something to mention. We've added a bit of another week lag back into our process.
It's just a week.
Just a week. We were putting the episodes out like 2 days.
Yeah,
after
I was having 2-day turnaround time.
And that's just
it's a lot.
It's a lot. Sometimes it's hard if you just don't have the time in those 2 days to get the editing done. You know, it forces you to, you know, lock your schedule onto editing. And so by putting a week break in there and then letting Aradia have a week, she can edit anytime during the week instead of just during those 2 days. So.
Yes, which was very nice during the last 2 weeks of being not in my normal space and having to work in a subpar office, which I'm back home now. And that's happy. But yes, that does create a slight awkward lag when important things like someone's health updates are in the content.
Speaking of updates, we need to know how your roof is currently progressing.
So my roof turns it was worse off than we thought.
Shocking.
It was not as well assembled as it should have been when the trailers were joined because it's a manufactured home. But we're fixing it now. So we're getting to the problems before they became problems. And we don't have the new roofing on yet, but it has all the old roofing's been taken off and the decking has been put on and there's like a felt tacked over it right now. And in like 10 days, I think the metal gets delivered and then they snap that on and put all the roof vents and all of that good stuff back into it. So far it's going really well. I have half of a roof. I have the old roof is gone, but I'm only halfway to having a new roof.
But you're in your house right now.
I am in my house right now, yes.
And so what's over your head?
Over my head is the same ceiling and attic and insulation and everything, and then new plywood, actual plywood, not OSB, thank you. And then a felt layer that is rated for a year of open exposure, actually. And it only needs to last for like 10 days.
I guess I'm not entirely sure how felt is rated for exposure, right? Like,
I mean, it's what they called it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not like crafting felt. I'm sure it's like roofer felt. But, you know, like what I would have expected would have been like a tar paper that would have been tacked down, like a roll of tar paper that would have been rolled out. And that would have only been good for like a month or 3, maybe. That stuff ages much more quickly and is much more wrinkly in like the water sun cycle. But this is more of like a woven felt like matte material that they tacked down, and it's denser and more impervious to the elements.
Is it the felt going to be removed before they put on the metal roof, or will that stay on there underneath the metal roof?
I think it's going to stay.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm not sure, but given how much the metal is going to amplify the sound of the rain, I wouldn't be surprised if leaving a squishy layer there to absorb some of that oomph might not make sense. Also, more insulation. I'm not sure. Probably it'll stay up. I suspect it will stay up. They took the dumpster out of here, so they're not planning on throwing away large amounts of stuff at this point. But yeah, that's I'm excited about it. And ironically, so I know I apologized at the beginning of those 2 episodes that my audio wasn't going to be as good because I wasn't using as good of a mic, but I was recording in the bedroom of the place. And so it was really tiny and it was mostly full of a giant bed. And so it actually sounded really, really good.
Isn't that
maybe
the way it
better
works?
than this room, even though I was on like this shitty mic. So
that's so frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, I've said to so many people when they ask me for advice about podcasting, you know, my 2 rules are: don't buy the cheapest mic. Spend $100, right? Like you're not going to regret it. Spend $100 on a mic, right? And treat the room. Right? Put up foam everywhere, put up fake walls, hang blankets. Mostly what you're going to do is the mic is only going to pick up the sound in the room. And if you don't treat the room, it's going to sound like crap. Right? It doesn't matter what else you do. It doesn't matter, you know, the difference between a $10,000 mic and a $100 mic in a crappy room is going to be insignificant.
Yep. So, pro tip, record in a bedroom or in a closet. Small space is full of fabric.
Right. The trick is it has to be full of stuff, right? If you record in a closet that you've emptied out, that's terrible, right? You want to have all those clothes hanging. I think some people, when they're like, oh, in a closet, I can empty that out and put my desk in there. It's not the small space. The small space actually makes it worse. The trick is all of the fabric and everything to absorb the vibration.
Yeah. It's just easier to control in a small space. You have less space to fill up with soft stuff.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?